Hello everyone, welcome to the Blockchain Beyond the Hype session. My name is Saffi Ali, I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft, and I'm also the blockchain champion within the customer success unit at Microsoft UK. And in today's session, I'm going to be covering three main aspects of blockchain. So the first session is what it is blockchain, why would you need to use blockchain, what are the main use cases for blockchain, and then I will be talking about some of the main use cases or the important use cases that actually blockchain was a major enabler. And lastly, I will be talking about what are the current offering that we have in the Azure platform that will make your life easier when it comes to developing, maintaining blockchain applications, and one of the main aspects that I will be talking about, how to integrate your blockchain application with your legacy line of business applications and solutions. So let's get started. I'm going to be starting to talk about one of the, why would you need to use blockchain in the first place? Because a lot of the things that we tend to miss is basically when you look at blockchain, why would you need to use blockchain in the first place, right? So a lot of the questions is, and before talking about what it is blockchain, we need to think about how we establish trust and how businesses used to establish trust. So basically, trust is a paramount for every business, big and small. When you look at the normal supply chain around something, when you look at the property market, when you look at normal trade finance, trust is an important aspect of it, and you can't do a good business without having trust between parties. But actually, there are, when we are talking about trust, we rely heavily, and those businesses rely heavily into some sort of intermediaries. So, and one of them is, to enable that kind of trust, you have to rely on intermediaries to provide this manual verification methods that would, make sure that all of the paperwork comes from partner A to partner B are quite correct and quite authentic. So when you look at opening a bank account, actually, and I'm talking about the normal, the things that we used to do in the last 25 years. When you go to open a bank account, you have to some sort of an identity document that you have to provide to the bank. You have some utility bills, etc., etc. And actually, the bank either have some sort of verification systems in place, or they are relying on a third party, and most likely they are relying on third parties to provide that kind of verification before they will open the account. So what we are trying to achieve with blockchain is basically move from this friction by design way of established trust to the blockchain world, where we either eliminate intermediaries completely, or we can make the actual end-to-end business processes more efficient, because we can get them come together into a single source of truth. And I will be talking about in more details in the next slide. So blockchain basically streamlines this idea of business processes by doing an important things. So blockchain revolutionized the establishment of trust by acting as a secure shared source of truth that exists between all of these cross-party organizations. So they all come together to have this single sort of truth. And basically blockchain does this by storing a record of every transaction on a ledger. So basically, it's like a database, it's like a table, but the main differentiator between that is it's unlike any typical spreadsheet or a database. Every one of the blockchain network has their own identical copy of the ledger, and if someone wants to update the record, guess what? Before any transaction is added, altered, or deleted, every network member must agree to the change. And this idea of immutability makes it theoretically impossible to fraudulently alter data, since all changes must be approved by network consensus. So just keep this idea in mind, is that nothing in a blockchain can be changed without the fundamental agreement between all of these parties. The way they come together to agree is by consensus algorithm, and there are a few different consensus algorithms that we Depends on the blockchain implementation or the blockchain ledger that you're using. Whether this is a private or whether this is a public consortium, there are a few differences, but the fundamental idea is nothing changed in the blockchain without the visibility of everybody, and it's that's where blockchain is quite different than any type of a database or ledger technology. So just to reiterate on the immutability. So this immutability is particularly crucial when addressing multiple specific enterprise business needs. So when you are talking about trust, this is really important, because the first need is when a business process crosses trust boundaries. Whether this trust boundary within an enterprise, internally, internal processes, or whether this is a cross-party or across organization business processes, it means that multiple groups with potential conflicting interest, whether companies, customers, or even internal documents, must work together to exchange assets or information. So such processes are often critical to businesses, but it would be naive to think that they can take place without first addressing a sense of trust between all of these parties. The second use case, and the second use case for this kind of business processes that can be used in blockchain, is we are talking about multi-party work of the same data. So one of the things that blockchain can help with is you have to have a single source of truth, but at the same time you need to agree with everybody that this is a single source of truth. Because normally when we have this cross-organization workflows or business processes, usually everybody has their own copy of the data, and the actual synchronization between them is not necessarily runs at the same time. There could be a lag. It's not really real time. So that's where blockchain can have this solution out of the box. The third aspect is intermediaries, and I already touched upon that. Is that normally intermediaries control the single source of truth. You have to go to the intermediary and ask them about the information. Probably you will pay them fees to be able to use their tools, APIs, services, etc. So as we have already discussed, intermediaries introduce that kind of friction by design, and introduce lags when you even do a communication and validation between parties. The last use case is the last enterprise need that blockchain can help them with is, when we are talking about equal value, when we are replacing this slow, inefficient manual verification steps that we already talked about earlier. The important message here is to mention, the important thing that I have to mention here is blockchain is not for everybody. It's not for every business and every organization. It's really to solve a specific trust issue as part of any solution. That can be achieved by other solutions, but pretty much blockchain distinguishes itself because it ticks a lot of the boxes. In contrary, is not for everything that you need to. A lot of the use cases that when we go to talk to customers, sometimes it could be implemented with just normal hashing and stuff, and that could work well because they don't have really problem when it comes to trust at all. Just some of the people, especially around the media, keep mentioning blockchain, and blockchain it looks like a stamp in everything right now. But having said that, blockchain has a very useful and a revolutionary blockchain business application across industries. So from manufacturing to health. So when you look at manufacturing, this is one of the biggest use cases. I will be talking one of them when we're talking about real-time tracking for assets. Some people, sometimes it's called asset tracking, and sometimes it is called provenance tracking. Depends which type of goods and services they were talking about. There are a few interesting use cases when it comes to banking and capital market. The same thing for government. We have a very interesting use case when it comes to distributed identities, which is called DIDs, how to issue these kind of distributed identities that are verifiable. So blockchain really has a lot of use cases, despite the fact what I've said in the previous slide. It solves very tactical business needs. But at the same time, having said that, there are a lot of use cases that that blockchain actually can solve and revolutionize, whether this is from asset transfer and provenance to high assurance audit, and this is all across the board. Before talking about a specific use case, so I will be talking about 3 main use cases as part of this session, but really I wanted to kind of touch upon within Azure we have a very important, very rich ecosystem when it comes to partners and customer ecosystem. We have a lot of customers that are actually building a production application or have built production application right now. We have a lot of vertical ready partner ecosystem, and some of them have very experience in the capital market, in insurance, in marketing and all of that. So we have a very good ecosystem when it comes to the partners and customers ecosystem in Azure. So let's crack in and discuss one of these use cases. So basically, the first use case is, given the circumstances that we are living in right now, dealing with COVID-19, I wanted to start by one of the use cases that 3M have started in 2017 with Microsoft. So in 2017, 3M, if you don't know 3M is well known for pharmaceutical products and manufacturing, big manufacturing company. So, but this specific use cases was dealing with. So in 2013, let's discuss the story. In 2017, 3M Corporate Research System Lab, they began to explore how to add value for their customers through digital services and safeguard against tampering in its own supply chain. So tampering with medicine is just a huge, alone with we can't iterate much, and we can reiterate much that the fact that tampering those type of products is really life-threatening in the first place, but also it has a good a big implication when it comes to cost and reputation at the same time. So 3M turns to use blockchain on Azure to explore adding a shared data layer among all parties involved in the supply chain. So the company created a new solution concept which uses blockchain on Azure. They are using few databases for storage. And one of the good feedback that I have to say about this is using this blockchain has enabled them to have this high visibility about the supply chain end-to-end across multiple participants at the same time. They started with a good amount of participants in the first launch. And basically in the new solution concept, so members of the blockchain federated supply chain group will be able to see each step in the supply chain. So what happened and who was responsible for the product. So every time a product changes hands, the party receiving it would scan and activate the label. So this project, it's called Label as a Service. And actually that would provide all of the participants to have this high visibility about the each products along the way. And with blockchain service model and the relative low cost label compared to electronic based solution, so the label solution concept could save 3M customer money. And if you need to know more information about this use cases, you can go to the Azure case study website, and it actually indicates and has the details, and some of the use cases already have their architecture design there. But basically, as you can see here, from the manufacturing to the actually reaching the retail store, everything is stored in the ledger. So basically, as someone who buys a bottle can scan a QR code and understand the journey throughout the supply chain, because basically what the QR code will go to the website and try to first provide the authenticity, whether this product is authentic or not, and the second thing is it will provide assurances for different personas within the supply chain, like who was responsible for this particular product, what are they, whether I am eligible to receive that medicine or not, who received it in the first place, who produced it, who carried it from the manufacturing site to the retail store. All of this information is stored in an immutable, shareable data store, which is the ledger. The second use case that I'm going to be talking about is the secure marine insurance platform that has been built by an effort between EY, Maersk, and Microsoft and Time. So it's one of its kind. To build a secure marine insurance platform. Let's talk about the problem here. So think about what if you want to get an insurance quote for your car, that would involve coordinating with not only your insurance company, but your borough or state department, the Department of Transport, police station, state, sometimes the government itself and different government agencies to get just the code for that. What if your car insurance changed every time you crossed a state or a crossed a state or a borough or a different county line? So imagine that this is the situation. Pretty much this is what happens when it comes to marine insurance. So the insurance policy is not static, and it depends where the goods are. Different criteria when it comes to the route that has been taken by the vessel itself, where it is, where it has entered the danger zone, what are the longitude and latitude of the location, what are the experience of the crew. All of these parameters are getting filtered out and getting calculated to give a more realistic estimation of the risk, so they can know how much they can charge their customers. So to repair, for example, a state of a ship, the makeup, let's say the makeup and the experience of the crew, the flag under which the ship is registered, and the location of the ship all affect the cost and the ship insurance. And the insurance premium changes dynamically as these factor changes. So the biggest variable here is the ship's location. So for example, when a ship enters a war zone, insurance premiums shoot up, right? And because of the dynamic nature of the insurance pricing and the fact that so many parties are involved in insuring container ships, insurance provides reinsurers, claim handlers, surveyors, adjusters, agent, customers, port authorities, and others. All of these are just personas within this kind of cycle. So marine insurance costs are inefficient to price and very high in cost, which hurts the whole industry, right? And the whole settlement, you can imagine the burden when it comes to settlement, these kind of transactions, and how much it would cost when it comes to time and obviously money at the end of it. So the convoluted process also makes regulatory compliance challenging, because everybody has their own vision and own version of truth, and that will introduce errors and duplication across all of these personas. So it often takes months to agree on a contract terms and sometimes year to pay insurance claims. So having said that, let's look at blockchain, how blockchain is actually will help with that. So basically what you can see here, and this is just a very overly simplification of what I just said, but basically because basically one of the main parameters here is just the route that the ship is taking, where the ship is right now. So basically before the ship leaves the port, the main port, the departure port, there is an ideal path. It's pretty much like what a pilot does when on an airplane. There is a specific route, and there is an ideal path that you have to take. But during the journey, there are a lot of parameters like weather conditions, whether there is a geopolitical stability and all of that can come in real time, that maybe they would take different route and do a detour. And because of that, it's at the end of the day, it's just managing the risks. So the ideal path or the safe zone, maybe it's no longer safe, but there is a less risky one, but that would involve a danger zone. So because of that, all of the parameters has entered, and one of the variables in the calculation is the longitude and latitude. So GBS sensors and other sensors send GBS and location data to the insurance company, and not directly to the insurance company. It sends that information to the ledger, and because everything has been agreed upon before leaving the departure port, the actual calculation of the premium, it happens in near real time, and the actual settlement happens as part of the ledger because the terms and conditions have been agreed before. Everybody can see the exact location of the ship. Everybody can know who does what and what obligation every persona has. So that has provided three main things: single source of truth across multi parties, near real-time settlement and agreement on any dispute that may come, or even the insurance claim, and thirdly, from a regulatory perspective, they can come up and they can extract the information that they need to prove that what they are doing, whether this is right or wrong, and they can produce that in just a matter of minutes, instead of just waiting for months and sometimes years to actually do this kind of extraction in no time, in near real time. So I've talked about the use cases, which I hope that you found interesting. But basically, let's face the reality of building a blockchain from scratch. Unfortunately, building an end-to-end blockchain application is a huge undertaking. So blockchain's strength lies in its ability to automatically validate transactions against pre-agreed business logic. And thus developers want to spend their time writing business logic to develop smart contracts. But there are dozens of other steps that you must perform before getting into this stage. So from manually deploying a ledger, to managing pre-processing and storage, building the integration around it, creating web client interfaces, and more. And just building a ledger on itself, it's not an easy task. So basically, because of that, Microsoft had a very interesting view to the whole blockchain ecosystem. So basically, Azure Blockchain, we wanted to streamline these steps. So basically, we wanted to, from the start, we want a service like Azure Blockchain service to allow users to configure, deploy, and manage the networks, forming these foundation of blockchain apps in the cloud. And the way we build the Azure Blockchain service, we've made it ledger agnostic. So basically, we don't have a specific or hard limit towards a specific ledger implementation. So we have support for Quorum, which is an enterprise-ready version of Ethereum. We have support for Hyperledger Fabric coming soon. We have right now support in preview for Corda Enterprise. So pretty much the main player when it comes to ledger technologies. Azure Blockchain Service is a ledger agnostic. The second layer is how to model, and once your network is up and running, the other step would be how to write a contract, how to author test your smart contract like you do with the same tool that we all used to. So because we are, as I said, blockchain, building blockchain application is just writing a smart contract is different than writing normal code. What we wanted to do is abstract this layer and build a few plugins and accelerators in order for developers to treat blockchain smart contract pretty much use the same tooling, the same interface, the same generators with with one single IDE. So what we've done with Visual Studio Code, we've built the Azure Blockchain plugin, which basically abstract all of the tools that you require as a developer to get started. So instead of you download different tools in order for you to start authoring, building, testing, and deploying your smart contract, you just download Visual Studio Code and download this plugin, and you will be good to go, because this tool will abstract all of the steps that you might need. Once your network is up and running, Azure Blockchain Workbench, this is one of the things that is very good for dev and test to accelerate the POC period. So Blockchain Workbench can provide this intuitive UI for modeling and prototyping workflows. And Visual Studio Code integration makes it easy for experienced developer to author and test those smart contracts. So, and to ensure your network communicates with the data output and ingestion system you already use, we have built the solution accelerator that I mentioned earlier, which is part of something called the Azure Blockchain Development Kit. So within the development kit, you can see sample smart contract, end-to-end solutions, solution accelerators, even DevOps journey into how to deploy and automate the deployment of your smart contract from your dev machines through the testing environment and finally to the pre-prod and production environment. So we have, and I'll be showing that in just a second. So as I said, the Azure Blockchain Service is currently in preview. You can deploy fully managed blockchain network. So Azure Blockchain Service is a platform as a service offering. It will offload all of the burden when it comes to consortium management, so you can focus on your application logic. So you go to Microsoft, you'd say, I need a Quorum consortium. So we will manage the infrastructure, the network, and you only care about how to manage your application logic, the consortium management. So one of the good feature in the Azure Blockchain Service is the consortium management, which is basically, instead of you worry about managing the keys and who can do what in the consortium, we've encapsulated this consortium management with a set of PowerShell tools, and soon, once the service will ready, we are looking forward to bring that as part of the Azure portal itself. So it's a great way to abstract all of the efforts in a fully managed ledger technology as part of the Azure Blockchain Service, and at the same time being a ledger agnostic. I think I already covered that. Let's look at the current capabilities that we have. So right now in the Azure Blockchain Service, we have Quorum support. And as I said, currently we have the support for the IPFT consensus algorithm. So if you don't know all of these details, it's part of the Quorum consensus algorithm as part of it. So right now we support Quorum 2.25. And we have another, as I said, we have Corda Enterprise coming into private preview. And Corda is another ledger technology that's been, well known when it comes, it is useful in all of the use cases, or most of the use cases that I'm aware of, but it's very popular in the financial sector. So Corda Enterprise, it is right now in private preview, and if you are using Corda or willing to use Corda, this is the link for signing up for the private preview right now. So let's look at the Azure Blockchain Service. So this is just as I said, within the Azure Blockchain Service, we have planning to have this different layers of managing the consortium itself. So in the Azure portal, you will get an out-of-the-box monitoring for the transaction, number of transactions that's happening, analytics, integration with log analytics, Azure Monitor for logging and alerting. You can have high availability clustered and patching and healthy nodes. So as I said, it's a PaaS service. So we will monitor these nodes for you. And if you signed up for the standard Azure Blockchain Service, high availability is already included. So enough talking, let's have a look at the current consortium. So if I scroll a bit and go to the Azure portal. So what I've did, let's go to the portal and go to services. And if I go to all resources, let's have a look at create a new resource. So let's have add. So if I go here, there is a complete section called blockchain. If I click on blockchain, and as you can see here, there is the Azure Blockchain Service and the Azure Blockchain Workbench. So the Azure Blockchain Service is the managed ledger, and the Azure Blockchain Workbench is a layer on top of that will enable you to only write your smart contract, upload the smart contract, and don't worry about the user interface to even interact with it. So the Azure Blockchain Workbench is a good way for dev test and POC acceleration, but the Azure Blockchain Service is basically built for production workloads. But yeah, as I said, we have a lot of partner solutions, including Corda, Hyperledger, and later on I will be talking about the Hyperledger Fabric on AKS, the Azure Kubernetes Service. So what I've already done my consortium. So if I go to search for Azure Blockchain Service, if I click on that one, you can see I have 2 blockchain services, and if you can see here, these 2 services or these 2 members in 2 different subscriptions. Which is a good thing, and which reflects the reality. When we are talking about different members or different personas, each one of them has their own trust boundaries, and the way I model this trust boundary is by putting them in different subscriptions. So if I click on one of them, if I click on the member 1, as you can see here, this is the consortium name, and if I click on this, so I have a consortium called Saffi Demo Consortium. So if I click on that consortium, you can see I have 2 members as part of that consortium. One of them is one subscription, another one is in a different. One of them is admin, and one of them is just user. You can read more in documentation about what are the differences, but admin basically can do everything, adding, inviting members. Right now, the functionality is managed through PowerShell at the moment, but we are looking to bring that as part of the Azure portal when it comes out of the preview. So basically, as you can see here, if I go scroll down, right now, because I already deployed that just a moment ago, I don't have any transaction, I didn't deploy anything. But if I ought to deploy anything here, if a sample contract, I would be able to see transaction, number of handled requests, if there are any pending transaction, and also if I click on transaction nodes. Let's look at the transaction nodes. So right now I have one member called Saffi. That member has only one transaction node. I can add more nodes if I click on here, adding new nodes just for adding more nodes for when it comes to scaling the transaction. If you want to, if you've done your load testing and know how many nodes that you can add. So basically, adding more nodes is just as simple as that. You can add more nodes via PowerShell and CLI as well. But it's already, at the moment, it's already integrated with the portal if you wanted to. The other service that I need to mention here is the Blockchain Data Manager. And one of the things that you were required to do is extract transaction data from the ledger, right? So what if an IoT device sends this information to the ledger? How you gonna build reporting? How can you notify external system about events that are happening? So let's say that the IoT device or the longitude entered a danger zone for the scenario that I talked about. How can you notify the downstream system about this kind of event? So for this kind of situation, reporting and integrating with a downstream system, we have the Azure Blockchain Data Manager, which is a simple way to integrate the Azure Blockchain Service or the ledger itself, the ledger data itself, to the external world, which is if I click on Add, and as you can see here, this connect directly to the transaction node, and you just give it a name. And obviously, before I will be able to create a blockchain data manager, I need an event grid. So basically, the blockchain data manager connect to the event grid, and from the event grid, you can connect with hundreds of downstream system databases and applications. So if I close everything, let's look at the Azure Blockchain's development kit. So the Azure Blockchain Dev Kit, as I said, we have these different categories when it comes to the software development kit for Azure Blockchain. So we have Connect, Integrate, Accelerators, and DevOps. If I start from down to top, from down we have the DevOps for smart contracts. So something a lot of our customers and partners ask for, how we can use the same DevOps methodologies and practices when it comes to distributed applications. And basically this provides samples and an end-to-end cycle where you can utilize that as well using Azure DevOps or any tool for that matter. When it comes to connect, how can you connect data producers, how you can consume data from the external world and send them to the blockchain and the other way around? How can you integrate legacy tools? So if I click on integrate, for example, we have samples for document and media. So if I go to something like including the blockchain connected to the Logic app, which is pretty much a great way. So you can use Logic app to send information to the ledger, and you can use Data Manager to extract data if you want to. So it's pretty much we've got you covered here. So go to the Azure samples in the blockchain SDK. There are tons of samples in there, so you can try yourself all of these capabilities. So if I go back to the slides, so basically just to reiterate what I said in the Data Manager. So the blockchain Data Manager, as I said, it connects the Azure Blockchain service to Event Grid, and from the Event Grid, you would be able to send that to Logic app, to Functions, to Cosmos DB, and from any data store you can build your own Power Apps. And actually within the SDK we have a very interesting use case where you actually interact with the with your ledger, storing values in your ledger via the Logic app, and receiving events to your Power Apps, notification to your Power Apps once these events happen within the blockchain. The last thing I need to cover here is we have Hyperledger Fabric 1.4x on Azure Kubernetes services. So right now this is a program on preview right now. So you can sign up for this one if you want to, and we have a good documentation on that. So the way I think about running Hyperledger Fabric, if you want to use Hyperledger. So Hyperledger Fabric is the third ledger. Just I want to say that beforehand. So Hyperledger Fabric is a sample. Is another ledger technology that you can utilize, and right now you can run it on VMs, but also you can run that on Azure Kubernetes service on Kubernetes, which a lot of customers would need or would like to use, especially when we are talking about heterogeneous cloud platforms. When we're talking blockchain, not everybody uses a single cloud provider. So because of that, Kubernetes is kind of the best fit when it comes to that as well. But yeah, if you need to sign up for that one, if you go to the documentation, we have all of the documentation when it comes to running Hyperledger Fabric Consortium on AKS, and you can see here the step-by-step diagram into how to run it. And basically how to run that is just go to the Azure portal and search for Hyperledger on AKS. Hyperledger Fabric Azure Kubernetes. That's it. If I click on that one, that's pretty much it. So if you are experienced or wanted to look at running Hyperledger Fabric, I think this is a good option if you want to go to production right now. So just to summarize, in the last 5 minutes of this talk, not this slide, sorry. If I go back, go to this one. Yes, if I go. So basically within blockchain, we've covered, 3 of those things. So the Azure Blockchain Service, we've talked about the Azure Blockchain Data Manager, and lastly, we covered the Azure Blockchain Development Kit. The last thing I need just to mention, we have a new service called the Azure Blockchain Token, which is a TTI compliant token service for tokenizing everything. Token generally would require another session to talk about it, but basically you can think about tokens is a way to representing assets in the digital world, and the way for you to represent physical assets in the digital world is by generating tokens for them. So you will be able to track, let's say, an acre of land or an aircraft part or a mobile phone. All of these things can be represented by their parameters, their descriptions, their properties within something called tokens. That token could be, a mutable token. There are different types of tokens. So we have a service for that. So just to summarize, you can use Azure Blockchain Service as I just covered. We have the tools that can help you as a developer to kickstart quickly. We have the platform that can support you to elastically scale in a fully managed services, whether this is from the Azure Blockchain Service, whether you are using different type of ledgers, heterogeneous ledger. We have support for Corda, for Quorum. We have support for Hyperledger Fabric, whether this is on VM or whether this is on AKS. So pretty much we have a very rich ecosystem. And if you are thinking of running your workloads on running a blockchain solution, just feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to help you with that. So with that, thank you so much for your time and look forward to hear back from you.